The Black Swan is a pub in a small market town in the north, and I have been its publican for 22 years. I am Owen Bradshaw. I am 61. I have served 4 prime ministers in my bar, 2 opera singers, and 1 famous racing driver who paid his tab in cash and tipped the cook with a signed napkin. On the wet November evening I am about to describe, I served a touring concert pianist who had come up from the Royal Concert Hall after his recital, and who then, after his 3rd whiskey, challenged my pub pianist to a duel at the corner upright, and lost it before the end of the first contrapuntal entry of a Bach Fugue. The pub pianist's name was Niam Doherty. She was 25 years old. She had been working 3 nights a week at the Black Swan upright for 11 months. She was a good plain pianist on most evenings. She played the standards, took requests, kept the room going. She had a small reputation in the town for being able to read any piece of sheet music laid in front of her, which is not by itself what makes a great pianist. What made her great on the night I am about to tell you about was a thing nobody in the Black Swan had ever seen her do before. The touring pianist was a man called Stefan Marek. I will tell you the truth about him because I will not waste your time pretending. He was a good musician and a vain man, and the vanity was not the kind that does any harm in small rooms, only the kind that does harm in large ones. He was 41. He had given a recital that evening at the Royal Concert Hall, which sits 4 streets from my pub. He had played the 2nd book of the Well-Tempered Clavier in front of 900 ticket holders. He had been very well received. The review in the morning paper was already half written, in the favorable tone the music critic always used for Marek, and the critic himself was sitting at my bar with his notebook open in front of him. Marek came in at 10:30. He came in with his accompanist and his manager and 3 of the principal donors from the concert hall's board, and they took the long table by the fire, and they ordered the good whiskey, and Niam, at the upright in the corner, played softly through her standards while they talked. For the first half hour everything was as it always was. The room hummed, the fire cracked. Niam played a slow Cole Porter, then a Carmichael, then a quiet arrangement of an old folk tune that her father had taught her. Most of the regulars at the bar knew that arrangement and lifted their glasses to it. I poured drinks. The critic at the bar made 1 short note in his book and put it back in his pocket. Then Marek, who had been drinking his 2nd whiskey and had been talking, with increasing volume, about the difficulty of the fugue in B minor he had played that evening, turned in his chair and looked at the upright in the corner. He said loud enough for the bar to hear, "Goodness, a pub pianist, how charming." Then to his table, "Shall we have a request? I should like to hear something I know." His accompanist laughed politely. His manager looked at his watch. The donors smiled the smiles of people who had been laughing at Stefan Marek's jokes all evening because they had paid a great deal of money to be in the position to do so. Marek got up. He crossed the room to the upright. Niam, in the middle of a soft Brubeck, looked up. She did not stop playing. She gave him the small polite nod that pub pianists give to people approaching the piano. He leaned an elbow on the upright. "My dear," he said, "what is your repertoire?" She finished the phrase. She let the chord settle. She said, "Whatever the room asks for, sir." "What if the room asks for Bach?" "Then I play Bach." "What if the room asks for the C minor fugue from the 1st book?" She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "Then I play the C minor fugue from the 1st book." The bar had quieted by this point. The regulars knew Niam. They knew her well. They did not know what she could do with the C minor fugue from the 1st book, because she had never been asked to do anything with it at the Black Swan. She had played at the Black Swan exactly the things the Black Swan had asked her to play, which were the standards and the folk tunes and the soft cocktail set. Marek smiled. It was the kind of smile that is meant to be observed. He turned to the long table. "I have an idea," he said. "A small wager, a friendly one. I will play the 1st book C minor prelude and fugue. The lady will play it after me. Whoever the bar prefers gets the next round on the loser." He turned back to Niam. "Will you do me the honor?" There was a small laugh from his table. The donors looked delighted. The accompanist looked uncomfortable. The critic at the bar took his notebook out again. Niam finished the Brubeck. She set her hands in her lap. She looked at me once briefly at the bar. I did not know what to tell her. The Black Swan is a small, honest pub. Stefan Marek was a famous touring pianist who had been very good for the Royal Concert Hall and who had not asked permission to commandeer my upright, and the room was watching, and I am not the man who tells my pianist what to do. She looked back at Marek. She said, "It is your suggestion, sir. I will leave you the choice of who plays first." "Then I will play first." He sat down at the upright. He cracked his knuckles, which he should not have done. He played the C minor prelude from the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier, fluent, fast, brilliant in the way the city recital playing is brilliant. The bar listened politely. The fugue followed, and Marek took it at the tempo he had taken it that evening at the Royal Concert Hall, clean, sharp, with the four voices distinct as separate violins. It was a very good performance. He finished. He stood. He bowed to the room with the small, ironic flourish of a man who has just won what he expected to win. There was applause. It was the applause of a pub bar, which is to say it was warm and short, and did not commit itself either way. Marek gestured to the bench. "Your turn, my dear." Niamh got up. She had been wearing the pub's plain black work shirt and a pair of dark trousers and the small silver crucifix she wore to work every night. She crossed to the bench. She sat. She did not crack her knuckles. She did not roll her shoulders. She laid her hands above the keys, and she looked once, for a half-second, at the upright the way her father had once told her to look at any new instrument, as if asking it whether it minded, and then she played the C minor prelude from the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier. She did not play it like Stefan Marek had played it. She played it the way Johann Sebastian Bach taught his children to play it, slower, more patient, each of the running 16th notes given its own small, honest weight, the bass voice walking under them like a man walking a quiet road home. The prelude is 2 minutes long. By the end of it, the bar had stopped doing anything else. The critic at the bar had put down his pencil. The fire had not been fed and was beginning to fall. She did not pause between the prelude and the fugue. She let the last chord of the prelude settle and then began the fugue, and the fugue is where it happened. I will tell you what a fugue is, in case you have never sat down and listened to one properly. A fugue is a piece of music in which several independent voices, beginning at different times, each play the same melody, and the great trick of the form is that each voice has to make sense by itself and also fit perfectly with all the other voices at the same time. The C minor fugue from the first book of the Well-Tempered Clavier has 4 voices. To play it properly, you have to give each voice its own color, its own character, its own honest reason for being there, while keeping the harmony underneath all of them clear and the rhythm steady throughout. Most professional pianists, given the C minor fugue, get the notes right and let the voices blur into one tidy texture. Niamh did not let them blur. She took the fugue at a tempo that was neither slow nor fast. She gave the first voice, the soprano, its statement of the subject and let it sing, and then when the second voice came in underneath it, she did something I had never heard anyone do in 20 years of listening to that fugue on Sunday afternoons at home. She made the second voice sound like a separate person, not a separate instrument, a separate person. The bass entry, when it came, was a third separate person, the alto fourth. By the second exposition, there were 4 people in conversation at the upright in the corner of the Black Swan, and the conversation was the conversation of 4 people who all loved each other and were all telling each other the same story from 4 different angles. And the bar of the Black Swan, which had stopped doing anything else, was listening to that conversation the way a bar listens to a stranger telling a true story for the first time. I watched Stefan Marek's face. I have to tell you this because it is part of the story. He had come back from the upright to his long table by the fire. He had picked up his whiskey. He had taken 1 sip. By the second voice's entry, he had set the whiskey down. By the bass entry, he had stopped looking at his accompanist and started looking at his hands. By the alto entry, which is the entry that, if you have played the fugue badly, you will not have separated from the soprano, he had closed his eyes. He kept them closed for the rest of the piece. The fugue is just under 3 minutes long. Niamh took it through to the long final cadence, where Bach lets the 4 voices come back together one last time, and she laid the final chord down so honestly that you could hear, in the silence after it, the kettle whistling in the back kitchen behind the bar, which I had forgotten about for the first time in 22 years. I had not, in 22 years at the Black Swan, ever stopped pouring a drink mid-pour. I stopped mid-pour for the alto. The pint glass was 3/4 full and I let it sit there. The man waiting for it did not say anything. He had stopped too. He had set both his hands flat on the bar in the way men set both their hands flat on a bar when they need their hands to keep them in their seat. The applause, this time, was not the polite, warm, short applause of a pub bar. It was the slow, building, do-not-stop applause of a room that has just realized it has been in the presence of something it did not pay to be in the presence of. The critic at the bar was standing. So was every regular at the bar. So were the donors at the long table. So was the manager and the accompanist. So finally was Stefan Marek. He stood up the way a man stands up at the end of a sermon. He did not clap with the ironic flourish he had used to bow. He clapped with his hands flat and his head bowed, and he kept clapping for a long time. Niam stood, she inclined her head, she said, "Thank you, sir." She walked back to the pub kitchen door to refill her water glass. Marek did not sit down. He crossed the bar floor to the upright, and from the upright he came on across the bar to where I was standing at the tap. He set his empty whiskey glass on the counter. He said very quietly, so only I could hear, "Publican, who is she?" I told him she was Niam Doherty, 25, that her father had been a church organist in a small village 15 miles up the coast, that he had died when she was 18, that she had not been able to afford the conservatory and had been working bar jobs in the town for 7 years, that she came up to the Black Swan 3 nights a week and played whatever the room asked of her, that she had a small flat over the chemist on Bridge Street and 1 cat. Marek listened, he nodded. He did not speak for a moment. Then he said, "I have made an ass of myself, you will tell her so. You will tell her I have made an ass of myself and that I would be very grateful if she would let me apologize to her properly when she comes back from the kitchen. Will you do that for me?" I said I would. She came back, he did. He apologized in front of the bar, short, plainly, without flourish. He said he had walked in tired and vain from his recital and had assumed that a pub pianist could not be more than what the words pub pianist had let him picture. He said he had been very wrong. He said the C minor fugue, the way she had just played it, was the way he had first heard it in his own teacher's house when he was 9 years old, before he had been taught to be in a hurry, and he had not heard it played that way since, and he was grateful to her for it. Niam thanked him. She did not gloat, she did not even look pleased with herself. She said only, "It is a very good fugue, sir. It is hard to play it badly." The critic at the bar wrote down that sentence. He used it in his column the next morning. He used the column to tell the story of the pub pianist at the Black Swan who had played Marek to a standstill at his own piece, and the column was picked up by a national paper, and within a week Niam Doherty had received 4 letters, one from a conservatory in the south offering her a postgraduate fellowship, one from a chamber music ensemble looking for a keyboardist, one from a record label, and one from Stefan Marek himself, who had written, in a careful hand, a request to study with her for a week the following spring on the question of how to make the 4 voices of a Bach fugue sound like 4 people who all loved each other. There is one more thing I want to put on record, because Niam herself would not. After Marek had left the pub that night, and he had, after his apology, stayed on for another 2 hours and ordered a meal and tipped the barmaid handsomely and asked Niam half a dozen questions about her father, he came back to the bar to settle his tab. He stood at the tap. He said to me quietly, "Publican, I owe you a favor." I said, "Maestro, you do not owe me a favor. You drank your whiskey and you paid for it. The night was the night." He said, "Allow me. I am not in the habit of feeling I have something to repay. Tonight I do. Tell me what would be useful to you." I thought for a moment. I said, "We have a small piano in the back room of this pub that has not been tuned since my father bought it in 1974. If you know a tuner you trust, and you would be willing to send him to me, I should be very grateful. I should like to have the back room piano in proper working order again. Niam practices there sometimes on Tuesdays. I should like for her to practice on a proper instrument." He nodded. He took out a small leather notebook. He wrote down the address of the Black Swan. He said, "I shall send you a man on Friday. He will tune it. He will also restring the high octaves which by your description are well overdue for it. You will not receive a bill. I will tell him it is a personal arrangement. Will that do?" I said it would do. He came back across the floor to where Niam was clearing her things from the upright, and he shook her hand again and he left. The tuner came on the Friday. He restrung the high octaves. He sent me no bill. Niam has practiced on that back-room piano every Tuesday since. She held all 4 letters together at the bar one Wednesday evening before her shift, and she read them out to me and to my wife, and she asked us very plainly what we thought. My wife said the fellowship. I said the fellowship and the chamber music ensemble. The record label could wait. Marek's letter she did not need our advice on. She had already written back to him by hand and said yes, on the condition that he came to her. Since she had a Wednesday shift at the Black Swan, she did not intend to give up. She took the fellowship. She kept her Wednesday nights at the Black Swan because she said she liked the room and she liked the cat upstairs and she did not see the harm in being 2 things at once. She is 2 years on still at the upright in the corner on Wednesday nights. She still plays whatever the room asks of her. Some Wednesdays the room asks for Cole Porter. Some Wednesdays it asks very politely for the C minor fugue. and Stefan Marek did come up the following spring. He sat in my back booth for 6 evenings in a row, with a notebook and a small portable keyboard, and at closing time he would walk Niam home through the wet streets to her flat over the chemist, talking, the two of them, about voices and tempo, and the long quiet honesty of doing a thing slowly enough that the people who are listening can hear what the thing is actually saying. I have thought about that week often on the long slow nights at the bar. I have come to believe that what passed between them was the rarest thing I have ever seen happen in my pub, which was a famous man letting a less famous person teach him something he had needed to learn his whole life. He paid for his lessons in cash. He left a generous tip. He did not, like the racing driver, sign a napkin. He thanked me at the door on his last night and he said, "You have a great pianist on your upright publican, I hope you know." I told him I did. I had known since the first time I heard her play the folk tune her father had taught her, on her first Wednesday at the Black Swan. I had not known how great. I have learned since not to be surprised when the answer to a question I thought I had settled turns out to have been larger than the question. There is a quiet rule I keep behind the bar now, written on the same card on which I keep the prices for the good whiskey. The card reads, "Never assume the smallest piano in the room is being played by the smallest player." I look at the card before I open up on Wednesday evenings, when Niam comes in and shakes the rain off her coat and crosses the floor to the upright in the corner. I am 61. I do not have many lessons left to learn. The one Niam Doherty taught me on a wet November Tuesday, in front of a famous concert pianist, and a roomful of regulars who had thought they were in for a quiet pint, I expect I will keep for whatever years remain.